But first, there are renewed calls tonight for mandatory pill testing at music festivals after a number of partygoers overdosed at the weekend. 9 people were taken to hospital after ingesting MDMA at the Hard Mission Festival in Melbourne. 8 of those placed in an induced coma, with 3 still critically ill. Now, the Victorian Greens have already got a proposal for mandatory pill testing to go before Parliament next month, and the events of the weekend have only strengthened their resolve. Here's Greens MP Ave Pagelli.
They are more aware of the risks of what it is that they are taking and the dosage of what they are taking. And we actually know that, contrary to some opinion around whether or not it increases drug taking out in the community, there is a cohort who, when given that health information, will choose not to consume their substance, will choose to instead behave differently with their drug based on that one-to-one health-based conversation.
Liz, I get that, this is a tragedy whenever you see someone overdose, and of course I said 3 still critically ill. But is pill testing really the answer here, or does it just create more problems?
Well, I think it creates an impetus to just take more drugs. The reason why these substances are illegal is because they're harmful. And this entire, let's just do the harm reduction strategy with drugs of all kinds simply doesn't work. Look at the injecting rooms in North Richmond. So since 2018, which is when they opened, they said, we've saved 16 lives a year. But they've managed just under 8,000 overdoses. So you've created a facility where I can just get off my face, absolutely overdose to the point of death, and now you want to take credit for having saved the same people's lives again and again and again. Yeah. I know people say it sounds harsh, but I've always just said let natural selection take its course. But if you are dumb enough to seek out these drugs, pay good money for them because they don't come cheap, and put these substances into your body knowing that they could have any number of reactions.
But that's why it fails the common sense test. I mean,
yes.
They're the decisions people are making. So it fails the common sense test. Someone in a white coat says it's OK to take this drug. That's what they're doing.
And the problem is they can't say it's OK. I mean, they test the pill, but you can't ever say that it's safe because by definition, drugs are not safe, and there's a liability issue that you can't say it's safe because if you do and then something goes wrong, well, then you've got legal consequences.
And the on-site tests are very limited in terms of capability. So you can give me a pill and I'll be like, yeah, it's ecstasy. I can't tell you the strength of it. So arguably, these 8 currently in comas would still be in comas even if there was drug testing there and they did run them through the system.
But they are in comas. It does hurt people. So we've got to work out a way to tackle it. And I think there's a better way. What you do is you write a law so that the promoters of these things make millions of dollars. You say if you're promoting this sort of thing, you are legally responsible. You will pay a penalty for every illegal drug found on your site. Do that, I promise you, suddenly they will find funds to pay for proper security and the bouncers will search for drugs and bounce anyone who's got drugs. Well, there've got to be better ways of tackling it.
Just on that, I think we've got an image from the festival of a young person holding up their phone, literally advertising, there you go, caps, question mark, has anyone got some drugs you can sell me? So the other problem here is the confusion over law enforcement, because if you've got pill testing, then you're asking police to turn a blind eye to young people who do have drugs, because you're not going to go and get your drugs tested if you're afraid that it's a sting, right?
Yeah.
And the same instance in Richmond, as you pointed out, those injecting rooms where police have to avoid them and allow people with drugs to freely move about the community. So it creates mixed signals, doesn't it?
Oh, worse than mixed signals, it creates an impetus for me to do whatever the heck I want. You've removed the danger from it, which, as we've just said, is very misleading because these on-site tests do not remove the danger at all. Yeah. It can tell you what is in that pill, but it can't tell you how much or what it might do to your system. And again, if you're stupid enough to do this, then roll the dice. And let's see what happens. It was just last October, 18 kids in the space of one weekend, 2 events, 18 kids were taken to hospital, 70 arrests, for possession of drugs, 4 arrests for supply of drugs. That, of course, would have been a drop in the bucket compared to how many out of the tens of thousands of kids and teenagers attending those 2 events actually were in possession
Which is why pill testing fails the simple common sense test. It doesn't work. The kids are going to make stupid decisions because they don't understand consequences. In fact, it has been said that insanity is hereditary. We catch it from our children. And you can see that not just in the things that they put in their mouths, but how much their education is now costing. There's a new study from Victoria, sending your kid to a public school in Victoria, just paying the fees for the things you've got to buy for the kids, 36% more expensive this year than it was last year. That's a huge, when inflation is 4.9%, there's a 36% increase. This is not a state government that is really keen on helping people struggling with the cost of living.
The massive rub here, it would almost be okay if you knew your kids, for that kind of money, were getting a good education. But last year's NAPLAN results, released last August, showed Victoria was doing the worst out of all of the states. Although not much to crow about even nationwide, 33% of our kids' parents were not meeting the benchmarks, the NAPLAN benchmarks whatsoever. It was completely crushing. It was incredibly embarrassing. But Victoria was doing one of the worst out of all of the states, and yet they're charging parents through the nose for this absolutely shoddy sham of an education. And I'm sorry, it doesn't matter how much they say, oh, it's a teacher shortage or the quality of teachers. No, it is what is in your curriculum. It is pure BS. Kids are coming out the other end without knowing anything. And it's not that people have gotten dumber. Primary school aged kids 100 years ago were fluent in Latin and fluent in the classics. They're not dumb at certain ages. No, you are feeding them utter nonsense and they are coming out the other end. One of the worst grades in those NAPLAN results from last August, goodness knows what this year's will look like, was simple just numeracy and literacy. The kids couldn't do it. And that's to say nothing of the PISA results, that test that they do every 3 years to see how we're doing in comparison to OECD countries. Let me tell you, very bad, eye-wateringly bad. 2019, because they only do it once every 3 years, Australia got the worst results in our nation's history. Now, the next 3 years passed, of course, and this time it came out and they were like, oh, our PISA results were holding steady. We're holding steady. Holding steady compared to last time? That was the worst we've ever done.
Yes.
It's just embarrassing. But I tell you who's really wisened up on the public school system and the absolute gyp that it is, and that's parents in the UK. A new study came out today, poll I should say, showing that 1 in 3 UK parents believe the pandemic proved children don't need to go to school every day. Some 28% of parents said they felt that way, and only 70% are confident their child's needs are being met, a figure which drops to 61% at secondary school, according to the YouGov poll conducted for the Centre of Social Justice think tank. I just love this.
Yes.
I just absolutely love this, because by the government closing down government schools, sure, private schools did, but that's beside the point, closing down their own schools, adults are just like, hang on a minute, my kid didn't even suffer. You don't need to be there every day. Just like adults discovered, I don't need to be at work 9 to 5.
I don't think it's true that kids didn't suffer by closing down schools.
That was the socialisation aspect. Not missing out on this absolute BS education they'd otherwise be getting.
No, that's not true. Kids working from home with self-directed study was an absolute flop and a disaster for kids. But I agree with your point that...
In what way? What stats have you got to show that?
I've got 2 kids that floundered trying to study from home, and as a parent trying to direct their study at the same time, it was a nightmare for parents and a nightmare for kids.
Yeah, again,
it wasn't good.
I would say this is where homeschoolers shine, because kids were never young or old, high schoolers or pre-primary, were never meant to sit in a classroom and be spoon-fed what is a BS curriculum. It would be great if it was a great curriculum, but even then, it is not active learning and it's not...
So I agree with your point if these kids were staying at home to be homeschooled by a parent who is engaged, but I don't think that's what's happening. I think parents have just got used to the fact that, well, if the government opened pubs before they reopened schools, it's not that important to the government, it's not that important to us. Sure, Johnny, you can have the day off. He's not being taught and mentored at home by a parent who's concerned. He's just taking the day off.
I think you misunderstand. That's not what homeschooling is at all.
What happens when the kids stay home? If the kids only go to school 3 days a week, what happens the other 2? The parents work. This is why homeschooling is a great idea. I think it's a wonderful...
Much cheaper
and a lot
too.
Of Americans
you don't get those fees.
But you've got to have a parent at home to do that. And we're living in an economic world in which having a parent at home doesn't work. So if you've got a kid at home for 2 days a week, what are they going to do? They won't have a parent looking after them. They will have no one caring for them. They won't be doing homework. They won't be studying. It's just impractical. And you know what it does? It actually throws the entire class out. Because if you've got some kids there on Wednesday and other kids there on Thursday, how does a teacher introduce a new idea, a new concept? Got to teach the one class on Wednesday and then half the class is gone the next day. So he's got to teach the original, different concept again.
The BBC,
it makes it unworkable. It's not practical.
The BBC reported that last year, on any given day, 1 in 5 students was absent, and they're expecting in the year to come, 1 in 4 students on any given day will be absent. And I think the lesson from COVID from parents was that, well, education's not that important, and the government sent that education. As I said, they reopened pubs before they reopened schools, and so they've communicated, well, if your kid's not at school, it doesn't matter that much. I agree with you, homeschooling is the ultimate, but I don't think that's the lesson that's been learned here by people.
I just have to say, because I was homeschooled for several years, doesn't my smartness show? No, but it doesn't require, depending on the age of the kids, it doesn't require a parent at home. It genuinely doesn't. You are working at your own pace using what is called paces. And so smart kids graduate year 12 when they'd otherwise be graduating year 10. Kids that aren't so academic will probably finish year 10 and go off to a trade because they already know their strengths and weaknesses, and they're already 10 times smarter if you ask me. The stats on homeschooling and how much of a better education they get.
Liz,
but there's a misunderstanding that a parent has to be there. I think a lot of parents, when they think of homeschooling, they picture themselves at a chalkboard at home. It is nothing
but Liz,
like that.
I've got to ask you, because you said it is age dependent. At the right age, kids can do that, and motivated kids at the right age can do that. I accept that. What happens with the little kids who are learning the basic concepts? I mean, I've got a 5-year-old grandson and he loves doing certain things for about 5 minutes and then he wants to move on to something else. You can't leave those kids alone educating themselves for a long time. Direct instruction from the front actually works if the curriculum is good, right? If the curriculum is sound.
Well, I'm glad you brought up a 5-year-old because obviously they're not the age that I'm referring to that you would leave them alone just to do their paces. They can't read and write yet properly. Anyway, so yes, that part is very hands-on. But I tell you what, by the time Mum sent the littlies in our family to school, the school didn't know what to do with them because they were like, these kids are years ahead in terms of reading, writing, arithmetic, etc. and so on. But those kids are way better to then go on to do whatever else they want to do. But yes, those early years, very hands-on.
Can I just say, if you've got a 5-year-old grandchild who can concentrate on anything for 5 minutes, your grandchild is a freak.
Yeah, but
that's amazing.
Here's the other thing. Though that 5-year-old would otherwise be in a primary school from what, 9 o'clock to 3:30?
Yes.
That is not normal. If they're homeschooled, they might do 3 hours max with Mum, learning their ABCs or whatever the letter is that day, and then they've got the rest of the day to run around and do whatever. I know plenty of homeschoolers today who are like, I don't know what these public schools are doing with these kids, because we all know it's some sort of babysitting system, isn't it? Because the parents need somewhere to put them. And the schools are just basically looking after them for those hours, but they're not becoming more intelligent for having stayed at school that long. Homeschoolers are like, we go hard 3 to 4 hours, and the kids get the rest of the day.
All right, so I think we all agree that the schooling system is a mess.